And here's where I pretend that we're starting the meeting so that the podcast will have a beginning. Hi, everybody. This is Bob Ose, and welcome to the True panel for, what month is this? In COVID, it's like, what does time mean right now? It's July. And tonight we're going to have a conversation which is called Adapt and Survive, How the Arts Are Outwitting COVID, which is basically an excuse for us to talk to people who are involved in theater and involved in the arts, and just hear how the individual stories of how people are coping with this very troubling and challenging time. How are we staying artistic? How are we staying creative? How are we staying in the game? We've had other conversations about this, but we have, I think when you have different people talking about it, you'll hear different things. And I want my panel to feel very comfortable being honest about what's happened and how you've dealt with things, because I think everybody wants to know that they can do what you've done, that they can make it through. Hi, Randy Levine Miller. I'm going to take you off the stage, and now back to the welcoming remarks. I actually have to get used to using headphones because am I talking too loud because I have the headphones on? Oh, good. So let's just jump into it. This is going to be a loose conversation about how you are individually dealing as an artist, as a producer, as a theater professional, with the closing of all live theater and the move to virtual presentation. I assume that you're making the move. Maybe you haven't felt a need to. Maybe there are other things you're doing in order to keep everything going. I know Donna has a company that has to keep running. I know Cody has shows that weren't able to open, and he has to cope with that, and has other things in production, and same thing with Brian. And Dennis has projects that you were excited about and has suddenly ground to a halt, and you're on hold. So let me start with Dennis. From a creative artist's point of view, tell us what you're going through and what it's been like for you.
Well, it's been very hard. My profession, and as I'm sure all of your guests today would understand, involves being in a room with a bunch of people. And when you are not able to do that, it's hard to adjust to.
To my limited thinking, because I'm not in the dance world, I would think that dance is the hardest thing to interpret for virtual. Would you agree with that?
I think you are right. I think friends of mine who are writers and composers. It's a little easier, I think, for them to continue to be creative and artistic during this time period, and it is harder, I think, for directors and choreographers, but possibly choreographers specifically. I do have some friends that have been very involved in creating dance pieces that are Zoom specific, but as I said, what I am passionate about is the collaboration that I have with dancers in the room. So without that, it's it is not easy to soldier through this specific thing we are experiencing right now.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, I gave everybody your bio, but brag a little about the stuff, the great stuff you've done.
Oh, well, I mean, hopefully long story, somewhat short. I came to New York to dance on Broadway. I was very fortunate in that I got to, for the better part of 15 years, appear in a number of Broadway shows and tour and see the world and really kind of live out that dream. I started working as an associate to Jerry Mitchell, the amazing Jerry Mitchell, who turned out to be a kind of a mentor and actually a very dear friend. to me, and I started working with him on various projects as associate choreographer. And that takes us to 12 years ago when I decided that I wanted to do it on my own. I've done a handful of Broadway shows as choreographer. I'm nominated for a couple of Tonys, and I've also started directing. Like over the last 5 or 6 years, I've split my time between being the choreographer and also being the director choreographer of musicals.
Well, that in itself is always an interesting conversation to me. Can you tell us why do you want to direct and choreograph? Tell us what the difference is for you in terms of your artistic fulfillment, choreographer, director, and why you want to make the shift.
I mean, to me, it feels like a natural progression. I mean, I like to work on musicals where dance is an essential part of the storytelling. And also working with directors who I can collaborate with, not only in terms of the whole show, in terms of the design, in terms of the staging, in terms of just the overall kind of takeaway of the experience of the production. I am very involved anyway. So I do think that the best collaboration between directors and choreographers are ones where the lines are a little blurry in terms of what your specific job is. So transitioning from choreographing to directing and choreographing, to me, it felt quite natural. Plus, I came to New York to be an actor. I got an acting degree at NYU, and that was my big plan, was that I was going to be this serious actor. So I have a fair amount of shorthand from my time at NYU that I have found to be very helpful in terms of my interaction with actors. I feel like I know how to speak to them, and the time also that I spent in shows as a performer also, I think, has given me an ability to speak to singers and dancers and actors from a place of knowledge. I know what it is to be them. I know what it is to do 8 shows a week. I know, I have lived it. So I feel, like that has helped to heighten my ability to communicate with performers.
Are you able to tell us about any of the projects that are on hold that you were gearing up to jump in and get involved with?
Not to get overly specific about things. I mean, there were various things that were to happen this year. A couple of things that were, going to be, productions, as well as a handful of shows that are in development. And, like everybody else, the plug was pulled on all of those things, and whether that means that these projects are postponed or are just going to, disappear entirely, it's a little hard to say. I do feel like although I need to kind of move out of that, I feel like I'm in a bit of a waiting period.
So that was going to be my next
round.
And
as this thing drags on, like, I should probably think about getting out of a waiting period.
That's going to be my next question to everybody. I want to basically get everybody's background a little bit, and then I'm going to turn to specifically when was the moment that you realized you had to pivot, that you had to change? Yeah. We'll get to that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to move to Brian Moreland right now. Brian, tell us a bit about your background and the projects that you're involved in, and what you're doing now to keep yourself sane.
All right. What am I doing to keep sane? What are my projects? Well, first, my #1 project after this Zoom is to go and get a job from Denis Jones, because I want to join the fan club of everyone else that's on the Zoom with Denis Jones. That's like the first thing. So I'm gonna put that on my #1 pivot list.
You're hired.
Thanks. Check. All right. I'm a producer. I'm an independent producer here in the city. I was currently working on American Buffalo with Laurence Fishburne, Darren Criss, and Sam Rockwell. That's on hold to go to Circle in the Square. I also have a production of Blue that's being directed by Felicia Rashad, which stars Tony and Emmy winner Leslie Uggams and Emmy winner Lynn Whitfield, and CBS star Brandon Michael Hall. That's on hold. That's going to the Apollo. Both of those plugs were pulled just to be on hold. How am I spending my time? I have been donating my time to a lot of different theater companies, do a lot of online benefits for them. And a lot of community. I really believe in our theatrical community, especially when times are very hard. I think it's an important part for everyone to do their fair share.
Okay, you raised a question that I wanted to ask you, that I do want to ask you now. It's slightly tangential. The Apollo Theater, they moved to be accredited Broadway theater.
Oh, yeah. So there is a movement afoot. That is true. I think is the best way to say it. There's a movement afoot for them to become a part of the Broadway community, to be the 42nd theater for Broadway.
And the show that you were planning on producing there, was it hoping to be considered part of the Broadway season? No,
not at all. So we were unable to secure a theater for Broadway itself, like one of the traditional 40 houses, minus one since it's under construction. And we were unable to secure that. We went uptown. We decided to go up to the Apollo. Many people in the cast have a strong tie to that particular community and that particular theater. So it was a good fit for us. We went there void of the Tony, void of anything to do with that.
Interesting. Okay. I was curious about that when you mentioned the Apollo. I'm going to move to Cody. I'm saving you for last, Donna, because the plight of a non-for-profit is one that I relate to very much. And we're going to talk, we can both talk about it. But Cody Lassen, you're an unadvertised special. So tell everybody a little bit about your background.
When Bob asks, I just say yes. I don't question it. So I joined at the last minute. And thank you, Bob, for putting this together and kind of just keeping everyone focused on their work during this time. I think that's very helpful. And Dennis and I were working on a musical last year together. Brian and I, hopefully we're working on a couple shows together. Donna, you and I have not worked together yet, but Triassic Park was one of the best times I've ever had at the theater, which I think you're involved with. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm a commercial producer. I got my start at NBC Universal working in their theater department. Went from there to Center Theater Group, a big nonprofit theater in Los Angeles, where I was their marketing director for a while, but for many years now have been producing on my own. Had How I Learned to Drive in Tech right when COVID hit. We'll be reopening in April of 21, so a year past when we were supposed to. Just went, and our set is still there and about 1/4 of an inch of dust, but it's still standing. Did Indecent, that was in previews in London when everything shut down, that we did on Broadway 2 seasons ago, a few seasons before that, the Spring Awakening revival, and a bunch of shows in development other than that.
Good. Oh, well, that's, all right, that's pretty concise. And thank you for being on the True board. I appreciate all the support you always give. I'm very grateful to you. So Donna, tell us, there's a long history with Amas, and just bring us up to date a little bit on Amas. Let anybody who doesn't know what you do a little bit about that, and tell us about Rosetta and all that.
Well, Amas Musical Theater develops and produces new musicals that explore ethnic themes, work with multiracial casts, and also we work with young people and from the metropolitan area. So we were very busy this year, and we had a show called Romeo and Bernadette, which did very, very well and was all ready to open off Broadway. And I was working on that move with Eric Krebs, and we literally walked into the theater at 11 o'clock. The actors had their microphones in there, ready to go, and we shut them down. And that was 3 hours before Broadway shut down. So when you ask, well, is this postponed or is it just, canceled? Well, it was canceled to a great loss of money. And who knows, Dennis, who knows, right? We also had the night before canceled our annual benefit. We were ready to go with a revival of Four Guys Named Jose and a celebration of Latin culture. That got shut down. And when the schools got shut down, so did our training program for teenagers. So that was the first pivot we did. I mean, after kind of a week, we didn't have our classes on Saturday. We were in rehearsals for Into the Woods. And I just said, we've got to keep going. We've got to give something to these young people. So we pivoted. We put the classes online, and we knew we couldn't do even an hour and a half musical, but we did a medley of songs from Into the Woods. We wound up doing a 17-minute video, which we learned just by diving in, and boy, we learned a lot. And I I gave us a B plus. Chris Scott, our director, gave us an A minus because he's he's a little less critical than I. But you know, we were proud of the work, but we knew where we had to go for the next round as we were learning everything we could learn, going to webinars, going to seminars, talking to people, watching videos, and just deciding, well, what kind of content do we want to put out there online without kind of creating the cacophony, but doing something that's going to add to our art form and also add to the general zeitgeist now. What's going to be important to people? What do they want to hear? What do they need to hear? You know? So that's what we're working on. The company is in its now, as of July 1st, in its 52nd year.
Wow.
So we're thank you. I mean, it's crazy, right? So we're planning, and I think there's nothing wrong with waiting either. There's a big piece of us that has to just wait and be patient for things to get better. As you said before, Bob, we can't rush into something and cause, you know, any health issues.
Right.
So
The key issue for many people who have basically surrendered to the idea that we can't go live for a while, it's going to be a while, is finding ways to financially stay above water, to keep going financially. Have you found any revenue streams for Hamas that are able to keep you afloat? And how are you dealing with the finances of it? I mean, I can tell you what True is doing also. I can tell you that.
Well, we took advantage of the payroll protection program,
right,
which helped us through 8 weeks. We got a grant from the New York Foundation for the Arts, which was a compilation of different foundations who got together to help arts organizations in New York. So that was all very helpful. We are participating in the shared work unemployment program because I'm just trying to keep us fiscally sound as we continue. We have plans for the fall. We have a few benefit music videos that are going to be coming out, but we are very conscientious. We want to share that. One of them is going to be a song from Romeo and Bernadette, Moonlight Tonight Over Brooklyn, which is a love song to Brooklyn, which I think everybody could use a little pick-me-up. And we're going to do that for the Food Bank of New York City, because if music is the food of love, we still all need to eat. So that's one of the things we're doing.
Tell that to Congress.
Thank
So,
you.
Dennis, to go back to you, what was the moment where you realized that I mean, I think a lot of us were clinging to what we were used to, and we were thinking, is this really going to happen? Is this really going to happen? I mean, I know what the moment was for me, but what was the moment for you where you went, oh, we're here, this is happening, I have to adjust?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there was a moment. I mean, it's been kind of a slow and steady adjustment to the just the magnitude of this. You know, certainly, you know, like the first act of this for me was, you know, the first 6 weeks or something, and just kind of holding on to the idea that like things are going to come back in the fall, or, you know, maybe this is going to be a few months, and
Memorial Day,
obviously
July, the fall.
yeah, I know. And then you just keep kicking the can down the road. And now we're actually talking about next year. And, you know, and honestly, next year is wildly theoretical. I mean, I not to be pessimistic, we hope that next year is a time that we can, you know, gather together. But, you know, we're all kind of operating in the abstract here. So, I mean, it has been a slow and steady and not complete adjustment to the reality of this moment. You know, I think that I'm certainly very grateful, that technology now allows us to do something like this. You know, if this had happened a few years ago, it would, you know, I would feel significantly less connected to people that are important, not only in my creative life, but just in my personal life. Like the ability to see a bunch of people like this and communicate like this is, you know, it's an enormous blessing. And, you know, it certainly allows you to, on some level, continue to work. I mean, projects that I had mentioned before that were either to be a part of this year or sometime in the future, you can still have productive creative conversations about those projects in the hopes that they will, you know, be like fully realized in a real way at some point. And that, you know, that keeps you going. But I don't know, I wouldn't say that I had a moment and that I fully adjusted to what this is and that I was able to kind of like pivot and really, you know, harness my artistic energy and you know, throw it at what we're dealing with right now. I'm somewhere down the road.
Question, specific question. Have you thought about, or have you yet done any virtual directing? Have you gotten involved in any shows that have been done virtually?
No. I did. Yeah, I co-directed a project. It was a benefit for Save the Children that I did recently that I was very proud of. You know, certainly it's a nice time to raise money for people who need it. So I was proud of that. But I have not been involved in any sort of Zoom, like fully realized Zoom readings. Zoom has been my friend in terms of like, you know, continuing to meet with teams and talk about the future, or just continue to sort of work on projects, but not to the level that they, you know, resulted in like a Zoom presentation.
Well, let me move the question to Brian and Cody. Are you using Zoom at all right now in virtual presentation at all for the development of new work? And if not, can you give us a little sense of, and this may sound like obvious and things that people should know, but we probably don't. Tell us, what is the status of the shows that you had in development? What is the status of the shows that had to close and we're hoping we'll be able to reopen next year? How is the business coping with that? Either one?
Sure. I mean, it's all an unknown right now, right? It's, you know, I'm not paying rent to the theater. The theater owner is not threatening to kick the show out. And I think we're all kind of, you know, crossing our fingers that as things reopen, we'll, you know, sit at a table together and kind of figure out what's the best way forward, knowing that we're all going to have to make sacrifices and make tough decisions.
But to reopen a show that's closed, even though you're saving money on rent and all that, won't you be encouraged? I think that don't assume that we know more than we know. I mean,
sure.
Aren't there going to be expenses involved?
Yeah, I mean, so there's, you know, there's the expenses of what's sitting in the theater, right? Right now I have, you know, probably 600 lights from PRG and a bunch of audio equipment from Sound Associates. And I have set pieces that are rented, and I have a landlord that I have you know, it's not actually a lease, but the equivalent of a lease with. Those were all kind of frozen and hoping for the best. But assuming we can work out a deal that makes sense for everyone there, you know, a Broadway musical is going to be at least $1 million to put people back into rehearsal for a few weeks, to re-tech the show, to get, you know, the designers and the technicians back in just to inspect everything and make sure it's working. You know, I'm not a dancer, but I can only imagine, Dennis, in a dance-heavy show, if you have a cast who hasn't been in a room together for a year, you need pretty much the full Broadway rehearsal period to get people back. And that's assuming you can even get the whole cast back, right? I know I've seen some people on social media have to move out of New York. Will they be able to come back to New York with, you know, a few weeks notice if a show starts back up? Will you have to put new people into the show? That's all to be determined. You know,
I bet they would, though.
I would hope so, but I think,
yeah.
you know, you'll have people who will be sick, who have lost relatives.
Yes, of course.
You know, I wish I could say we could all, you know, with a week of brush up rehearsals in the afternoon, jump right back onto the stage. But yeah, in reality, it's going to be kind of relaunching a show, or probably more a better analogy is it would be like launching a tour, right? You know what the show is, you've got the show. Now you're having to kind of remount it, even though a lot of the people were involved in the first one. Insurance.
I'll ask the painful question. Where is the money going to come from? How are you going to raise the money when you're ready to?
That's a very good question. I mean, you know, the painful answer for me is when Indecent closed in the middle of previews in London, I had an American cast and design team and director and writer over there who all had non-refundable plane tickets, because that's what we do in this industry. So I put down my credit card and bought 11 last-minute tickets to get people home from London, and that's personally on me right now, that I'm hoping someday the show can make that money back and repay me. But you're gonna have individuals who have made sacrifices. You'll have shows that sadly won't reopen. We've seen a couple of those announcements already. I think a lot of that's up in the air right now.
Brian, where was Diana when everything shut down?
In previews. It was in previews. They're not opened yet. Still tinkering with the show. To go back just a little bit to answer your question a little more broadly, Cody's absolutely right. It all depends upon where your show was in that particular process. So if you have shows that were sitting in the theaters who have actually taken occupancy of their theater, you have some landlords who are charging rent, some landlords who are not charging rent, some sets that are fully built, some people that have not even moved into the theater. So it all depends upon where that particular show is. For Diana in particular, yes, we have occupancy of the theater. Yes, we are still being billed, and we still have Zoom rehearsals happening right now.
You do have Zoom rehearsals, so you're so people are staying on top of their roles. Mm-hmm. And are you working at all with Zoom for the other shows that are in the pipeline?
American Buffalo cast is doing a once a month rehearsal, so they all get together via Zoom and just make sure they're all still together. Blue is doing once every 3 weeks for them to keep the cast together.
Cool, very cool. That's very. I personally find that very interesting. I wasn't able to imagine what you guys were going through. I just knew that it was a huge obstacle that you had a huge problem that you had to somehow solve.
Well, Cody's making it sound very easy, because that's what Cody does.
I'm just hoping for the best.
He is. Everyone's hoping for the best, but the part that he didn't reveal was the amount and the process of all the insurance claims that have happened here. It's a process. It's a part of a clause that you really hope that you never actually have to activate, and it's one that. It's almost like a drill, like an earthquake drill. I'm from California, so earthquake drill in California, and you do it, hoping that you never ever have the big one, and actually have to use what you've been learning. And their general managers were working overtime to get these claims in, and it's something that's really unique.
Cody, do you want to talk? Actually, that's a very specific thing, and I think because True likes to help artists and everybody understand the business. Can you actually dig into the insurance a little bit? What exactly is the insurance, and how is it affecting things right now?
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about here is business interruption insurance, right? Every show every theater requires you to have insurance to cover something like somebody tripping and breaking their leg in the theater, or something like that, which is not, on a Broadway show, that's easily $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a week, that policy. Then on top of that, most producers will take out some sort of business interruption insurance. I have for years gotten in fights with disagreements with insurance brokers, with general managers, because I have always taken out a policy that would be just enough to carefully shut a show down. And part of that was a gamble on my part, right? Thinking that's the most likely thing, is something will happen to my specific show and I'll just need enough money to pay those final bills so I'm not personally liable. But I was also thinking, if shit really hit the fan, if there's another 9/11, I wasn't thinking of a pandemic, but here we are. All of us filing these claims at the same time, we're probably not going to get back even what we put into them. And what I'm seeing from a lot of my colleagues who did have business interruption insurance that went beyond just carefully closing down the show, is they're getting a small fraction of what they assumed. And you can imagine how horrifying this is here you have some actuary and at an insurance firm who really knows nothing about Broadway, who is trying to predict how much money we might have lost in these 6 months that were closed. How do you, even us as insiders in the industry, there's so many variables in a show, especially a brand new show who's just opening, you don't really have a track record of, it's one thing if you're Wicked and you can say, look at the last 15 years, I can pretty much guarantee you the money we're missing out on by being closed. If you're, a Sing Street or something that was just on the cusp of opening, how do you prove to the insurance company, no, we were going to make $1 million a week, not $200,000 a week. And I don't think, no one's out to get us. I just think we're such a unique industry that there's really no good way to predict that. And unfortunately, folks are not getting the kind of money they need to keep afloat during this time.
Well, this panel is called Adapt and Survive, and it's clear to me that there's going to be some drop off as we start having an idea of when we can get back into business. It's going to hit some people hard, and some people may not be able to survive this. But I hope that a lot of people will, and I hope that you guys will, for instance. But it's really rough stuff. Donna, you have a financial model with Amos. You set up a not-for-profit so that you have a cash flow. How are you adjusting things so that you can still maintain a cash flow?
We're fortunate in that we don't have a lot of bricks and mortar. So for those companies that are trying to maintain physical spaces, theaters, that's something that they're going to have to work on. And I know that some theaters have shut down already because they couldn't get the landlord to not pay the rent. We're just being prudent. And I wanted to just say to you, Dennis, I mean, the pivot is not easy. It's very challenging. And it's nowhere near as good as being live together and collaborating in person. And we really miss that. And it's slow. It's like, I feel like we're learning how to make music videos. I'm learning about film. It's kind of like theater, but it's really film. And musicals, as so many people who are listening now know, it's its own animal and you can't rehearse. I mean, Cody, you were saying, or maybe Brian, you were saying about Diane and they're rehearsing, they can't sing together. So when we're doing any kinds of rehearsals, everybody's on mute and you just see these mouths moving, and it's challenging. It's challenging to try to bring it all together. So, but fiscally, just being cautious and watching the bottom line and trying to come up with ways to continue to raise money so that we can keep our doors open. So. If it goes on for a very long time, I can't speak to how we're going to fare or how others are going to fare.
Well, I found from the not-for-profit point of view of True, the community has been extremely, extremely generous. Basically, we've been doing everything with pay what you can. but I've been making it clear that we need something to come in. We can't just run on nothing. And the community has responded, and we really are not, right now, I'm not feeling a big pinch because the community is being very supportive. They understand that in order to do these things, that we have bills to pay, I have salaries to pay, I've got a small $450 desk in an office that I have to support every month. Then there's things like insurances. The insurances are crazy. I'm just going nuts from the insurances. But so far so good, knock on wood. And I think I told you, Donna, that when we did our play reading series and I did a pay what you can, the average ticket price that people were paying was $25, which I thought was not bad considering we're in such a new world. I'm trying to figure out what we can actually, what the market will bear. We're all trying to figure that out right now. Do you have any thoughts on that, Donna? Have you actually tried ticketing for anything yet?
Well, we're working on a project now that I'm going to, when we launch it, charge a $10 ticket and a $25 ticket and a pay what you will ticket, and we'll see what it brings in. If it makes back the money that we expended, that would be great. But it's really about launching this new musical, and we're trying to do it in as creative. And I mean, for instance, we sent green screens to all the actors so that we could create design and a set. And so we're working in that direction. But again, everything, I always called musical theater the glacial pace of musical theater. I think this pace is even slower. Getting the audio together, putting all the pieces together, then bringing the audio to the videographer and building that. So it's just a new world for us, and we're doing it because artists will create, and that's not going to stop. And we want to keep being able to reach out to people, but I am not personally wanting to just do a lot of stuff just to throw it out there and say, we're here. I think I know you, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think there is a Zoom fatigue that's going on. And I talked to a lot of people about that. And the attention span is not what you want it to be for certain presentations. So that you've got to keep that in mind. So we're learning.
Well, the thing about Zoom is people in industry who are invited to readings all the time, it's kind of like this dreaded situation where they know that they're going to get invited to a reading of a new work, and they're going to sit there and they're not going to be able to leave. So with Zoom, it's actually easier to get a lot of industry to come and watch things, because nobody knows if they're not watching.
Right.
But I mean, I believe that Zoom is, I think that it's a convention that we're all accepting. And I think the industry and all the people that are here with us tonight and people that are on all aspects of theater are accepting this convention as something that we need to, as a community, we just have to share, we have to use what we have. It's the resource that we have. So we're using it. Now you, Donna, you're not doing anything live from what I'm hearing. Everything you're doing.
We have some live events planned for the fall, but they're going to be more along the line, panels.
Okay.
And discussion.
Panels are easy for me on Zoom. This is easy. Doing
right.
When you start deciding that you're going to do a reading or produce a reading, you have to make a choice, because on one hand there's a feeling that the live stream gives a little bit of a sense of something being live, that it's happening in real time while people are watching it. But on the other hand, you can make it polished and you can get rid of any mistakes if you pre-record and then you do things in post, but you edit it in post-production. Cody,
so we're going to introduce with a live presentation and then introduce the video. Yeah, it's too hard to do a live music video. It's just, you can't do it.
Right.
Unless you do a combo.
Solos you can do.
Yes.
But you can't do anything beyond a solo.
Maybe Cody, a duet.
Maybe a duet, yeah. maybe a duet. But you also, that involves new expenses that we're getting used to. We have to understand now that we have to pay for technology to some extent. The free technologies aren't always as effective as things that we have to spend a little bit more money on. And the other thing that we're learning is that we need a really good tech person to help us with our presentations. I think it's become very crucial. I think it's become obvious that that's necessary. Cody, have you thought about doing any kinds of works, producing anything virtually? Brian, either of you, have you thought about being a virtual producer for a little while?
I have. I'm doing. I have two. I'm just wrapped my second one. My first one, I did a virtual reading for the Classical Theater Parlum as a benefit with Joe Morton and Blair Underwood and Tisha Campbell, and it's not without its challenges. It is definitely not without its challenges, and definitely Donna is absolutely correct. You spend time sending microphones and green screens, and then paying your editors, and then hopefully raising money. And I feel like this window of time is closing rapidly on the amount of funds that people are going to be able to share with artists for good causes. I don't mean that people don't want to give. I think that as we are slowly and crawling back to work, we are realizing that that's not happening as quickly as we thought. And I think that will affect the length of those. And then I'm doing another one currently that's all recorded called While We Breathe. And that took a lot of time.
I want to answer a question from the crowd, from the people that are watching. There are two paths that I know of that you can take in doing a virtual reading. One is you can do it through the Theater Authority. This is the easy way. Theater Authority gives you permission to use any of the union actors from any of the unions, and you pay them a stipend. They ask that you pay them a stipend, but it's a very affordable way of doing readings. And after you do the reading, they allow the reading to stay online, recorded for I think it's 4 days, 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the easy button. The harder thing that everybody's still trying to maneuver is it's pretty much decided right now. Somebody might find something that's changed by tomorrow, but at the moment it's pretty much decided that Zoom and live streaming and streaming is considered new media, and it's being relegated to SAG-AFTRA. So you can do things on SAG-AFTRA and you can record them. I don't know what the technicalities are when you pre-record and then you edit and post-production, but I think what the unions are really concerned about is not whether you're recording and editing it, but how long it's available for the public to actually see. But depending on what you pay on your SAG-AFTRA contract, you can actually, I heard you can actually keep something up for as much as a couple months if you're depending on the level that you're paying. Does anybody know about that? Because if not, I'll email Martin Platt. He'll tell me all about it.
Yeah, so you're sitting in two camps and or schools of thought. So SAG wants to actually regulate it, and then also Equity wants to regulate it, but it falls into the same category. The only time you can actually keep the length of time you can keep them up is 4 days. That is a hard rule on both sides. You can run it for an additional 4 days, but it's a hard rule on both sides. You can't actually do that.
You can pay SAG-AFTRA for longer streaming.
That becomes a different contract then.
It's contracts, yes. It's all about the contracts. It depends on the contract that you're using. The simplest thing is the Theater Authority, but that has to be for a not-for-profit, and the money has to be demonstrated to be going to a not-for-profit.
Correct.
There's also the politics, the unwritten rules where, SAG-AFTRA and Equity are not necessarily agreeing internally as sister unions who has jurisdiction over what. So they're, I've heard about situations where SAG-AFTRA says, yes, we definitely have jurisdiction, go on the new media contract, $100 a day, piece of cake. And Equity, in so many words says, this looks like a theater piece, this smells like a theater piece, you're using people who make most of their living on the stage, you do this under the SAG-AFTRA agreement, your life will be hell when things come back and you want to work with us again.
I had a conversation with Martin Platt, who had a conversation with Equity and SAG and AFTRA, And as of last week, Equity is relegating this to SAG-AFTRA as new media. I don't think there's, according to Martin, according to his conversation, but I'm going to get Martin into the room, not tonight, but maybe on one of the upcoming Fridays, and he'll update everybody on what the new ruling is. He said this is new. Equity finally is letting go and saying SAG-AFTRA can do all of the new media stuff.
I mean, we have a word for, you know, doing these things and streaming them to the public, which is television, right? You look at, you know, the thing Benj Pasek and Justin Paul did is, you know, nominated for an Emmy. Like I think it's pretty clear that that's the jurisdiction. I think where Equity is getting a little upset is this a project that had the trajectory to be a stage show, and now you're kind of trying to take a left turn and make it something else?
That, according to Martin, they finally let go of. They basically, if it hasn't been on stage, and if it isn't going on stage now, it's new media.
That would be great.
Yeah, he
So
said.
I have a question.
Sure.
Looking ahead, when we can go back to the theaters, but there's going to be a limited number of people they're going to allow into the theaters. And for my way of thinking, the way to get past that is to live stream the performance to people who buy tickets for that evening. How is that going to work? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about that. Are they? Am I Brian and
with
Cody?
the Broadway League and the Off-Broadway League have been very clear that there will not be theaters reopening with social distancing, just because the economics don't make sense. So that's not to say you're going to see a few theaters here or there, you know, try something. And we've seen some of this in regional theaters. I think, is it Barrington? Someone is doing
Barrington's trying it, and American Repertory Theater is trying it.
So I think if you're a nonprofit and you have some more flexibility and you have some donors who can, you know, underwrite the cost, I think we're going to see some experimentation there. And I think you'll see some maybe off-Broadway nonprofit theaters try that. But I think commercial theater as we know it in New York will wait until we can get, you know,
Everybody in the room,
Yeah.
which would then trickle right on down. Because
Yeah.
I mean, even for a small theater, not being able to fill the house is going to have a deleterious effect.
Well, I would imagine even as an audience member and a cast member, you know, we all feed off of each other's energy. And if you now have 6 feet in between every person, I know when I see a show that's, you know, only 40% of the house is filled, it kind of, the energy gets sucked in.
That's true.
Well, and there was the experiment just recently in London, was it 3 days ago when the article came out, I think, Cody, when the Palladium tried to reopen for that one evening with Beverly Knight. And the feedback was, yes, it was successful backstage. They were able to actually make that happen in a safe manner, but they were not able to actually create the same effect for the audience in terms of how they feel about actually receiving the show. Not that they didn't feel safe, but to Cody's point, how you feel when you're sitting in an empty house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Lonely. I want to let everybody in the room know that if you have the participants window open, you probably have chat open, but if you also have participants window open, there's a little virtual handshake at the bottom. If you have any comments or questions, preferably questions, you can raise your hand virtually. We'll call on you, and we can start talking. The room can start talking to the panel. So while everybody decides whether they have a question or not, let's. Oh, Nora. Nora, did you have something? Did you have a question? You're okay. I have to unmute you. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
How about now?
Fine.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to share my recent experience. I did a Zoom play last Saturday and Sunday and decided to charge. Like Dana was saying, we charged $10. And I felt, okay, if we have 10 people or 20 people, that's fine. But I want to start training the people to pay and not get free entertainment. And I was amazed because over the 2 days, we had 125 people.
We also did our play reading series. We did it virtually and in June. And that's when I told you we did a pay what you can.
Yes, I also allowed pay as you can was an option too.
Okay, for one of the performances, we had about 175 people, and for the other performance, we had
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
what was it,
and
like
I think
150.
it's our responsibility to train back the audience that they need to pay, but also deliver the quality. Like, for example, in our case, it was not a reading. The actors had memorized their roles. There was minimal staging within the framework of the screen, and so on and so forth. So people feel like they got their money's worth. And the other thing is that the play lent itself to that format. So, but I can see that musicals where two people have to sing together or music has to play and somebody else has to sing to it, that is quite a challenge. So you have no choice but to record it previously.
Yeah, there's something, I'm going to have to mute you for a second. There's something called latency that makes it impossible. So basically, the only way that you can actually do a musical performance live is the music director has to create a track, send the track to the singer. The singer has to actually sing it to the track in their computer, so there's no latency between the accompaniment and the singing. It's possible to work on a duet, but it's impossible after. I mean, in ensembles, it just isn't going to happen. Anybody else want to come in and ask a question? Raise a hand. Up. Okay, Margot Astrakhan, I have to unmute you. Margot, where are you? Margot, I lost you. There you are.
Yeah, I have to fix yeah, okay.
Hey.
So,
Margot.
hi Brian, hi Cody, hi Donna. So, I wasn't going to miss this, Dennis, when I saw your name. Sorry.
It's so nice to see you, Margot. It's so nice.
Dennis.
See, another person gonna get a job, Dennis.
I was talking about you with Richard Winkler today, but anyway, we'll catch up. So one thing that I want to point out, we did a big Zoom reading of Radio Galaxy, Bob.
Yes.
And we didn't use a technical director. And that is a big mistake because the audio quality depended very strongly on the quality of the equipment that the various participants, we have 6 actors in that play, and it varied widely. And I think it's worth, if you're going to do it and you're serious about it, and this was being looked at in London and so forth, you really need a technical director who understands how to work with this media, because otherwise, as amateurs ourselves, it's very inconsistent.
You also have to know enough about it to know which platform is best for you, because Zoom is very basic. StreamYard is like a one step up, I think. StreamYard is a lot more compatible with doing a combination of live.
Could you talk a little more about that, Bob?
About StreamYard? Okay, well, StreamYard allows you to do a combination of live and pre-recorded. StreamYard does give you some editing capability. What really becomes a sophisticated choice is something called OBS, which is a whole studio. It's a studio that you actually have of your own, and it's free. Believe it or not, it's free. But you have to have but it becomes a little bit expensive because you have to have a server that can handle it, and then you basically stream through Zoom or wherever else you want to. But you're creating it on the spot in OBS, and then you're streaming it. Or you're recording it, and then you're editing it, and then you're in post production, and then you're streaming. You're not live. Well, the difference is between live streaming and streaming. So,
I will say that StreamYard, you can only have 6 people on at one time. So if you want to bring another person on, you got to take one person off. So you couldn't like have all of your audience and these participants and people who are listening and coming in and out with more than 6.
I forgot about that. It's true. Is anybody else, any of our viewers, audience members, know anything more about the different platforms? There's a whole bunch of them. We did one Friday gathering about all the different platforms there are. I think
that's the best reason to hire a technical director or somebody to manage that is they'll know what platforms to use. Chances are they'll have accounts with them. They'll deal with all of that. A cost behind it, but probably worth it if you're trying to sell a show.
No, You want to say something else, Nora? Let me unmute you.
I have a question about StreamYard, because we used StreamYard during the film festival, which we took completely online in June after the March event was canceled. And all of our Meet the Filmmaker interviews were done through StreamYard and is streamed directly on our YouTube channel. But I wasn't aware that you could do that as a paid service, because the moment you put it on YouTube and it's StreamYard is putting on YouTube, then obviously it's open and free for everyone to watch.
Not
Well,
if
it's
you,
only-
not if you put it on YouTube in private. So basically,
Yeah.
only
I
people
see.
who have the link can see it.
Okay, all right.
And both YouTube and Google and Vimeo and all the major services have a way to monetize video. So they'll process the payment for you. They'll give access. I assume they take a cut of what you're selling, but.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anyone else in the room want to say something? Don't be shy, guys. Come on. Come on. Okay, well, I was hoping for more questions so that I could think of what I wanted to ask you. I don't think we, okay, now we have hand raises. Joanne Phillips.
Restream.io will allow you to take your live video or Zoom video and send it out to about 30 different platforms.
Okay.
Restream.
Yeah, she put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Restream, RESTREAM.io. Again, there are dozens of platforms, so I don't know them all. Neil Rubenstein.
Yeah, it sounds like for musicals right now, the best way to do it, and the only way to do it, is pre-record. And then you can put it on, whether it be streaming or on Zoom or whatever. I'm looking into that now. We're talking about, with Dennis directing, just doing the music by itself, just to keep it short, so we keep the attention of the viewers. And down the road, we may do another reading, as it were. But for now, just do the music. But
yeah, Neil and I have been talking a lot about this recently. I think to Donna's point, I mean, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I think, for a period of time earlier in the pandemic, I think that we were very excited to see actors and know that they're still there and being creative and joyful. And there have been moments like, Ladies Who Lunch that were just like these unbelievably successful, incredible Zoom moments. But Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And Neil and I, not to reveal everything in our conversation about it.
You can reveal.
With the the new musical Dangerous, my feeling was that doing a full reading of a brand new show, 2.5 hours. We don't even know how long it is. I mean, it is, even though we have done readings of it, it is still very much words on a page. And I was concerned that for a new musical that has not yet had the benefit of all of the developmental work that I think a musical deserves and requires, a concern of mine was, putting it out there to the public as a somewhat finished product in a reading form might be premature. And I advocated, or I should say that, our conversation kind of morphed into maybe doing some kind of Zoom, pre-recorded, of course, like pre-recorded and edited and very much controlled concert of some of the music from the musical might be a kind of a slicker way to share, with the world, kind of what the show's about, what it sounds like, what it feels like, without actually presenting to the world, like, here is the musical how do you feel about it?
Whatever is done, whatever we do, it has to be done. It has to be done properly. To what Cody said, definitely you need a tech in there because people will not look at talking heads. I had this years ago when I first started doing video. When video was an unheard of thing, and you had talking heads. Doesn't work. You need to have photos. You need to be able to do other things in there, and to do that, it's a lot of editing.
Yes. I mean, also like the advances in terms of, creating Zoom like content for the world are sort of accelerating at a rapid rate. I mean, people are becoming very sophisticated in terms of this technology and in terms of creating sort of new and exciting versions of Zoom content. So pre-recording everything, having a good editor, like having also like some kind of artistic point of view in terms of like what this thing is going to look like, I think are really important because we have to keep people interested in
The other
watching
thing
things on laptop.
I want to
You're
jump in
absolutely
and
right.
the one thing I want to jump in and say is we all have to just embrace this as its own medium. We have to conceive of what we're doing for this medium. That's the other thing that I hope some people will take away from this. You can't recreate a live theater performance in Zoom. You just can't do it. So you basically have to take stock of what it is you have, what it can do, what it offers, and find the advantages, find the things that it does well. It does intimacy very well because you have faces that can be talking right into the camera, and you can have a real sense of intimacy. So I think that when we're working with Zoom, we have to really think about what will be effective in Zoom. It's just not an easy even translation. Theater to Zoom, even film to Zoom. Zoom is its own thing. I have 3 questions. I'm hoping that some of the questions will be questions that will engage the panel. But I'm always happy to hear what everybody has to say.
Let me just to reiterate something Denis said too. I think so many of these video readings that I'm getting invited to are open to the public. When pre-COVID, this would have been a reading open to the industry and some trusted colleagues. And I don't know, I think too many people are thinking, what an opportunity, we can get thousands of people to see this. Where as an industry member, I'm used to being in a shitty, unair-conditioned rehearsal hall with fluorescent lighting and hearing a show read. And Zoom, I think, is kind of the equivalent of that, right? It's not a pleasant way to see a show, but I can kind of look past all that. I think the moment you open up a stream to the general public, it has to be really polished. They're not, that's going to turn them off from ever wanting to see the full production if they see a bad Zoom reading of it.
Absolutely.
On the plus side of that, you can now reach people that before you couldn't. I mean,
Sure.
Now you get 10 times the amount people from across the country, outside the country that you never could reach before. So that's the plus side of it.
Well, I think you have to be very, very clear about what you're doing for Zoom and what the audience is and your intent is. So if your intent is to raise money, like if Donna's doing one for a mosque, then obviously that's a very specific thing. If you are looking to do something for development, then it's something you want to really adhere to what Cody just said, because if you open your show up to the general public and it's not good, but not because the show's not good, but because the quality isn't ready yet, some people may not be able to imagine what your show could look like down the road, and then therefore they decide not to work with your show.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, 100% to your point, Brian. Like the show that we're talking about, Dangerous, does feel, I mean, I wouldn't say like completely dependent on the design, but I think that the design for the show is going to be very important. Obviously, like if you're, doing a reading at Ripley Greer or something, you're not going to have the benefit of the design either. But I worry about a show like this being presented in a Zoom format, like conceivably will kind of work against it. Whereas a concert or you know, a Zoom music video, or just, you know, like 3 or 4 songs from a show, I mean, the score is incredibly strong, and I feel like that as a kind of a self-contained event on Zoom could be really helpful, just in terms of, you know, kind of getting the music out there and getting people interested in it, or getting people curious, or that to me feels like a way that all of this, you know, Zooming can really, you know, can be our friend. But sometimes a Zoom reading, I don't know if it necessarily works in your favor.
Well, I do agree with what you said about basically, if you're having technical problems with Zoom, or if your cast doesn't have good Wi-Fi and somebody's breaking up all the time, it does make it harder for the audience to appreciate the potential of the show.
Yeah, but I'm even talking about like a pre-recorded reading. You know what I mean? Where hopefully you've kind of worked out the kinks.
Yeah,
but
this applies across the board in early development. Whether we're doing a presentation at Ripley Greer for 60 people, members of industry, or we're doing something on Zoom and have the idea that we're going to get 1,000 people from around the world to see it. Just, you have to really be honest with yourself about where you are in your development, whether you want to expose it that early.
Yeah.
So that's just a caution. And I've got June Ospa, Carol Weiss, and Jessica Chen waiting to say something. June, are you still there? I think June gave up.
Yes. Oh. No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, so what was it you wanted to ask?
Oh, no, actually, I have really good information, because I've been working with Bart Chateau on pieces, and he has a friend named Rodney Weber, and he does live streaming, directing, technical, cam op. This is what he does, and he did a piece for me that's amazing. You know, actually having people singing together. He's got a website. You could look at his commercials, his theater, and I wanted to share that with everybody.
Did you put him into the chat?
I'm going to do that, and
okay.
I highly recommend him.
Yeah,
so
I have some terrific tech people I can recommend as well. So if anybody's looking for tech people, you can gather a couple names, and you can just interview and see who you feel comfortable with, just like anything else. When you're working,
I mean, he would probably even, you know, come to one of these if you wanted him to.
We'll talk about that. I
okay.
Probably will need somebody in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Carol Weiss, do you want to come in and ask your question?
Yes. Pardon my ignorance, but if with the pre-recorded music, if you're using more than one person, do they wind up lip syncing to the music, or how does that work?
That is an option.
Well, the best method that we found so far is you get a track to them, and then they listen to the track through an earphone, so we don't hear the music, but they do, but we hear their voice, and we record their voice.
And it will be simultaneous if you do it that way?
No, it's not simultaneous. This is all for pre-recording.
I'm sorry. Okay, you get a track to everybody, and they're in different locations.
No.
Right.
Right? And then when you're recording them on video, do you record them all at once?
No.
One track at a time.
Okay.
It's basically how you would do it in a studio. You always record. Well, you almost always record one voice.
I know that.
I do, and then you
because there's too much lag.
Yes. So then after you've done that, then you get a video editor to put it together. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, first you have to put the audio together, then you put the video together.
Of course. Now I understand. Thank you.
Jessica Chen.
Hi everyone. I'm wondering if there's any thought to bringing like a bare bones cast into a space for a period of time where they're housed and cut off from the world and tested properly and all that fun stuff. And then they can rehearse and present live events where they're together in this space. So that's my question. If the panel has any thoughts on that. I do bridge my work between the theater world and the concert dance world. And there's a company in the modern dance world, Parsons Dance, that's doing a 2-week residency up in Chatham, New York. So I'm just wondering, theater folks, if that's in conversation at all, or interesting, or what? Yeah, that's my question.
I mean, I think that really depends on if you're using union actors. And if that's the case, Equity has a blanket rule now, no productions, but they have given permission to some productions that have presented a safety plan that they've approved. So I think it's just more hoops to jump through, but probably the biggest thing is, the cost to house and feed and test and all that would just make it, the economics not make sense for most productions.
And I think that in order to do this properly, you would have to quarantine everybody for 14 days before you can actually even start your work. Because even if people test negative for COVID, there still is a 2-week period where they could become positive if they've been in contact with somebody. Just look at what's happening in the baseball world right now.
Yeah.
So the answer is, of course, it's possible, Jessica. It's just it's expensive.
I believe that's the model that they're using for some film productions right now, where they're isolating themselves, they're creating pods, if you will, but there's no going away from that. There's no going home to your family. There's no going to town. You're just there to make the movie, and they're testing and they're all those things.
The other thing that is being done is there's this green screen acting. Basically, Equity will allow one actor and one tech person to be in a room and I guess it's not Equity, it might be SAG-AFTRA, can be in a room and actually shoot their part of a scene. And then they have to go out, then the other actor comes in and shoots their part of the scene. It's all against green screen, and then it's all edited together so it becomes a scene. So you don't have a real actor interaction. And to me, it's magic if it actually works, but I'm told that they do it. Anybody hear about that?
No.
Tom Poland is one person who I know works that way. So I know it is done. Any other questions from the room? Something to engage our speakers so they can speak more? Anyone? Well, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. So basically, I want to thank you guys for being with us and talking about your own personal experiences. I don't know if there's anything that you didn't say that you're thinking, which maybe I could have mentioned that. Any last minute thoughts, just let me know. Raise your hand and I'll call on you.
I have a question, Bob.
Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. Is it basically to Cody? So the rooms that are out open, like Ripley Greer, if we could ultimately at some point down the road get, say, 2 or 3 actors in the room and videotape those actors to then put them on, you still need everything else to do it. It couldn't just get them in the room, videotape it, and then and still be under a SAG-AFTRA contract to add that to the.
Yeah, 100% you could, and be well within all the agreements and within, the rule of law. I think there's just the whole unwritten thing. If you're a business rep at Equity and has been talking to you for the past few years about a show that was very clearly intended for the stage, you have every right to say, you know what, I've changed my mind. This is now a TV project. You no longer have jurisdiction. It's just been my opinion that when you do something like that, Equity can go out of their way to make your life miserable on other projects. So that's my concern is kind of the long-term relationship with folks. And
it just seemed like if we're going to be doing Zoom, because it looks like this is not going to go away for a while. This is going to be here. So if I'm able to do that, that would at least, having people together where there needs to be that interaction works better. Matter of fact, I was trying to get a husband and wife team to do it, that they'd be in their room. It'd be perfect because, at least they could do their ballads together.
I'm going to send the rules that I got from Martin Platt because nobody believes me. So I'm going to actually send the email that he sent. I'm going to share it with everybody. As long as I have your email, you'll get it.
Yeah,
And,
Martin is my executive producer on this, so.
So he spent a lot of time talking this through with Equity and SAG and AFTRA, and so I kind of trust him on it. So I will give you, and it's not what it was 2 weeks ago. It's what it was as of last week. So just know that this is it's evolving, but it seems from what he's told me, and I hope I'm not wrong, because he was adamant about it, Equity has released all of this to SAG-AFTRA. They are not claiming any of it to be within theater's jurisdiction. And that is new, and maybe I misunderstood him, but I read it in the email, so I want to share the email with everybody with Martin's permission. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Martin to come and speak at the True Community Gathering probably in 3 weeks when I'm back. I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, yay. But in 3 weeks, on Friday, August, what would that be?
Who said you could go on vacation?
My boss told me I could go.
Bob?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes, Marco.
So when you ask Martin, ask him also to send the contact of the guy in LA from SAG-AFTRA, because I've spoken with him and he's very well spoken and very easy to talk to, and he explains it very well.
Okay, and I
If
hopefully
people want to.
hopefully I understood Martin. I mean, we had this conversation. So and
Yeah,
also
but
I guess
Martin isn't the union rep, so.
what he said, he spent like hours talking this through this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We will find out what is real. And the one thing I can tell everybody is if you're thinking about doing something and you don't know whether you can do it or not, call up Equity, call up SAG-AFTRA, and just ask them, what can I do and what can't I do, and what is the agreement that is necessary. So make sure that you're doing it the right way. I don't want anybody to break any rules. So any other comments before we close up shop and I go get dinner? Joanne Phillips, I can't hear you.
I was just chuckling.
Oh, okay. So again, Denis Jones, Cody Lassen, Donna Trinkoff, Brian Moreland, thank you very much for being with us. I appreciate you giving up your time and sharing your knowledge and your experience with everybody. I think that this is what we have right now. This is how we have community. We have it on Zoom. 4 months ago, I would have been incredibly resistant to this, but I realized that this is reality, and I've jumped in with both feet, and I'm just doing it. And people seem to really be appreciating it and enjoying it and feeling a sense of comfort at knowing that they have a community that they can talk to. So thanks for being part of that community, everyone.
Thank you.